Resident Evil Requiem's DLC just got a huge update, and honestly, this changes the entire timeline. One of the most trusted insiders in the industry, and it sounds like Capcom's planning of the Requiem DLC is going to be bigger and more ambitious than a lot of us expected. But there's a twist that I think a lot of people didn't see coming, and we're going to dive into all of that today. We're going to talk about the scope, the scale of the DLC. We're going to talk about all the recent leaks from the insider, and so much more. Guys, we have a lot to cover. Check the chapters for easy viewing. Also, I've got a giveaway going down for 190k subscribers. Check the pinned comment, and let's do this thing. Okay, so according to insider Dusk, Capcom is reportedly investing in more lengthy story DLC for the future of Resident Evil, comparing it to the scale of Separate Ways from RE4 Remake and Shadow of Rose from Resident Evil Village. So from the sounds of it, that's the level of ambition that we're talking about here. Not a small bonus mode, even though we did get that. That was like a pretty awesome mini game that we got for Requiem. But we're talking about a full side story with weight and depth behind it. And that's the part that makes this so interesting. This approach applies to both Requiem and the future of Resident Evil titles, apparently. So the Requiem DLC is not going to be a one-time thing. This is Capcom clearly setting up a new pattern for how they plan to support the Resident Evil games going forward. Now, Dusk then talked about something that we've spoke about on this channel before, and that is the release date of the story expansion versus the release of the Resident Evil Veronica remake, which we're already in July. We're in the middle of July, so the fact that we haven't seen this Requiem DLC yet has a lot of people questioning when this thing is going to come out. But according to Dusk, it sounds like the Requiem Story DLC might not release until after Resident Evil Veronica remake. But I'll talk more about the specifics of the leak in just a bit. Let's dive into why this actually matters. RE9 RE Requiem launched on February 27th, 2026, and this thing honestly took off. Like, this has been a pretty big success for them. It became the fastest selling Resident Evil game in the entire history of the series. We're talking around 5 million copies in 5 days, and then about 6 million copies after 3 weeks, and over 7 million after over 2 months. With it beating out RE4 remake, it beat out Village, and it literally beat out everything else, which is not what I expected whenever this game launched, but I'm really happy it did. Now, a game with that level of success does change Capcom's outlook. They're probably seeing Requiem and they're like, this thing is still a cash cow. What are we doing? And I think that's a big part of this whole DLC debacle. Now, we've already had the mini game. They shadow dropped the Leon Must Die Forever completely free, which I thought was pretty solid, even though I still kind of wanted the Mercenaries game mode, which I'm sure a lot of you guys did as well, but I thought it was pretty good for what it was. I mean, heck, it's free at the end of the day, so more added content, more reason to jump on Requiem is always a good thing. Now, on his social media, Dusk then pointed out that Capcom has struggled in the side games in the RE Engine era with Revelations and the Chronicles games, and those types of projects have been tricky for them to make work in this new engine. So instead of chasing more of those side stories, Capcom is planning to use these longer DLCs as a replacement to those in a way that lets them spin up some new stories without having to separate it from a game that might underperform. It might flop. Okay, so now let's break down some of the specific details of this leak itself. First, the Resident Evil Requiem DLC is described as very ambitious, and it's directly responding to feedback from RE9. And that fan feedback is part of the reason why it's being pushed back, probably to give them more time to develop it and make sure that the DLC really is exactly what we want. Capcom obviously wants to do it right, but that takes time. Like, sure, they could release a small chapter and release it as DLC for a good amount of money, and a lot of people would buy it. Like, I'm sure a lot of you guys would buy it. I would buy it, but not Capcom. They're like, hey, we're gonna give these people their money's worth, and at the end of the day, it just takes a little bit more time. But the reason for the delay comes down to their focus right now. According to Dusk, the team is currently, and this is the exact quote, all hands on deck for the Code Veronica remake. They're aiming to finish Veronica by the first quarter of 2027, but it could slip to the second quarter if they need a bit of extra runway and time. So at the current moment at Capcom, Veronica is the top priority for them. They're trying to cook on that one, and I'm okay with that. Like, it feels like yesterday that we got Resident Evil Requiem, and then we're getting Veronica next year, and then boom, we're getting new story DLC likely after that. Now, one other tidbit that I wanted to talk about was Dusk said that Capcom does not have a grandmaster plan pulling the strings. They're actually looking at what releases and being responsive to fan feedback. They're not like scripting everything. It's not like some puppet master doing everything that's all fully mapped out. And he credited Capcom's responsiveness for Resident Evil being what he calls the third golden age. He also said that Resident Evil Requiem blew up way bigger than anyone expected, and that Veronica Veronica remake is already tracking to be the fastest wishlisted RE game in history. So it's like Capcom sees the release, they get the feedback, they read the room, and then they adjust, and that's worked incredibly well for them. Now, Dusk also said that this ties back to RE4 and RE7, which both of those came out of Capcom responding to the state of the franchise at that specific time. Now, in my last video, I spoke about how the Code Veronica remake and Zero remakes are set to tie into Requiem Story in some way, which from the sounds of it, that's more and more true. Like, we're gonna have Veronica potentially release, and who knows, maybe the events of that game will have a lasting effect on the Resident Evil Requiem DLC that we get. And then some of those events in that game might have ties back to RE0, which again, that would be absolutely insane. Now, my take on this is I actually like the direction. Separate Ways is one of the best pieces of Resident Evil DLC ever made, in my opinion. It took a great game and made it even better, offered quite a bit of story content that I thought was really worth all the money. So if Capcom is sitting there and telling me that the Requiem expansion could be built on that exact same standard, I'm in. I would much rather wait longer for something more ambitious than get something a bit rushed, like a small add-on that everyone just forgets about in 6 or 7 months. I swear to God, if you guys do that thing in the comment section with what I just said, just don't. It's over. Just let me have the numbers, please. Now, I also think Capcom looking at the game's release, seeing the feedback, and then taking that feedback into consideration and making something new is exactly what you want to see from many other game developers and publishers. The fact that Capcom is doing it so effectively just tells me that they get it and they double down on what works. It's why they've been cooking so much. Capcom is one of the best publishers. They might be the best publisher out there because of that. I don't know how hard it is for other companies to just, like, you know, maybe pay attention to their social media. PlayStation, I'm talking about you. I still don't know how PlayStation is able to tweet so much and avoid all of the controversy surrounding them. It's insane. But Capcom is like, hey, if you listen to what the community wants and then you do stuff that they like, then they're gonna keep on buying your games and the sales will be really good. Who would have thought? Now, in my previous videos, I did think that the story DLC would land around sometime in October of 2026, but according to this leak from Dusk, that pretty much kills that idea entirely. If the DLC is indeed releasing after Code Veronica remake and Veronica is targeting an early 2027 release, well, that October 2026 date is completely off the table, and we're looking at a much longer wait than I expected. But I will be real, if we get the Veronica remake in Q1 and then we get the Requiem DLC in Q2, that is perfectly fine with me. That's like staggering releases. We jump on Veronica, we play through that game, and then boom, we're back on Requiem and we play through that story. But I will say I do have some concerns with them releasing it after the Veronica DLC. RE9 fans have been waiting to see where the story goes. They want to see what this DLC is about. They want to know whether or not Chris or Ada Wong is going to show up, and now they have to wait until late 2027 or even beyond for that to happen. With the game selling so well, like, you would think that they would want to strike while the iron is hot, but they're just like, no, we're just gonna let the, you know, iron get a little bit cold. But then they throw it back in the forge and they pull it out and boom, what do you know, it's a shard blade from freaking Roshar. Like, I'm down with it. Like, that sounds really good to me. But it's undeniable, releasing something after Veronica means the hype might die down a bit for people and the sales might not be as significant. And if that happens and Capcom sees that, there might be like a dip into the DLC, whereas if they released it this year, there might be like an all-time sales record. Well, they might see that and then say, oh, people weren't interested in this DLC, it didn't sell as well, so therefore we might change what we do going forward. I feel like that's my only concern, unless this DLC is as expansive and as ambitious as what we're hearing it's going to be. If we get a 5 to like 9 hour story for this DLC, then I think that could probably have legs on its own. But again, there's so many other factors we have to look at. Capcom is still really deep into the Veronica remake, and I'd rather have that just be as peak as possible and wait a little bit longer for the Requiem DLC. But now the question is when could we realistically see this? Which I know that's probably the reason a lot of people clicked on this video for. Right now, Capcom is targeting the Veronica remake to release in Q1 of 2027, like I said earlier, but with a real possibility of it slipping to the second quarter, with the Requiem DLC coming after that. So if you do a bit of simple math, realistically, I would say that we are looking at Q2 at the absolute earliest, but maybe even the back half of 2027. But the only way that it would be the back half is if this expansion is really significant. Like, this thing has got to be so good that it really does feel like a contained experience on its own. Now, we have to be fair here. None of this is officially confirmed. Obviously, Dusk doesn't know the marketing plans for Capcom. We don't know what it is. A lot of this is speculation based on insiders' reports and stuff, but still, a leak is a leak. Plans can change. They change consistently. So really, who knows what's going to happen? Regardless, though, it does sound like they're planning something ambitious, and I can't wait to see what that is. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up with this video. Let Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, subscribe with your noties on, and until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.